So I know I'm wearing the same shirt as I did last week, and I just put on a sweater. But I filmed these videos in batches, because I'm too busy. So...
Damn, it feels good to be a gangster.
And we're in a change of season where I'm at. So it gets cold some days and then it gets hot some other days. So this is what we're gonna do today. But 大家好，欢迎来我的频道. My name is Bianca, and we've tackled pinyin and characters in my last two videos. Check those out if you don't know what I'm talking about. But now we're on to the big leagues, memorizing vocabulary. My favorite thing about language learning is memorizing vocabulary. Vocabulary retention can be very intimidating to a lot of people. I mean, I remember how stressed I was back in college trying to remember hundreds of chemical reactions in organic chemistry 2 hours before the exam. Although my issue may have been a bit different than an inability to memorize them, but rather a lack of time due to lengthy procrastination. But it brings up a great question. Can we only memorize language vocabulary through brute force memorization? I mean, that's kind of what we're taught when we go through language courses. Here's a vocab list, learn it, test, and you're good to go. But do you actually remember anything after the test was done? Probably not. When I was in high school, I took Spanish and Latin, and by nature of being incredibly similar to Romanian, which are all Romance languages, I didn't really need to study too much. So I just sat in front of the classroom and repeated the vocab words to myself over and over and over again 20 minutes before the test. Did well, and then I promptly forgot it all. We love ineffective study methods, yeah. So clearly that didn't teach me anything. I learned the vocab, but it only lasted for the hour during the exam. And this brings up an important point about memory. There's different types of memories and they're sorted in different areas. And this portion of the video will go into a little bit of neuroscience because I'll be starting my neuroscience PhD in September. So why not use memory systems as a way to fit my various passions into my videos? But don't worry, I won't go into all of the nitty-gritty details. I'll leave that for a future science of language learning video. But today, I'll just mention the most important concepts. What is memory? Remember when you first learned how to ride a bike? At first, it was really challenging. You had to really focus on moving the various areas of your body in the perfect way so that you can balance on a bike. But after practicing through trial and error, positioning your hand in this way, shifting your body in that way, engaging your core during the valleys and pumping your legs harder during the hills, you learned how to ride in such a way that now I'm sure you don't actually think about it. You just do it. Your body has muscle memory. Now, let's say that you're studying for a test. This type of memory can be considered a declarative memory because you're essentially declaring the facts. You learn names, dates, places, or vocabulary words and have to pull it out of your memory, recall it, and declare it out. And as you can probably tell, this requires some level of conscious effort. You look at a word, you remember it, and later on try to recall it. And now our main goal today is to make this process of recalling easier. This process of learning and recall essentially converts working memories into long-term memories. So let's go back to the example of me sitting outside my Spanish class, remembering dozens and dozens and dozens of words for a test. I learned and then recalled it during the test that was, let's say 20 minutes after I reviewed the words. Didn't I just memorize those words? Why did I forget them even just 2 hours later? That's because it was in my working memory. It helps us to remember information temporarily, kind of like posting a little sticky note to tackle the task at hand, like my exam. My working memory of the vocabulary helped me to pass the exam, and once that exam was over, the information was no longer needed. So I took off the post-it note and I forgot it. But as language learners, we want to learn vocab and retain it. We want to be able to pull it out when we're reading a book, or listening to a podcast, or conversing with people. And this is where the process of converting working memory, or short-term memory, into long-term memory comes into play. Memory is built from just a network of neurons, or cells in your brain that convey information. Different parts of the brain talk to each other and reinforce things that are considered to be important. And that's the big thing here, importance. There's only so many things that we can realistically remember. So our brain, throughout development from childhood to adulthood, has learned to clear away things that aren't useful, that aren't important. For any plant moms or dads out there, you'll probably see where I'm going with this. When you're tending to a plant, there are leaves that are growing super well. They have like new little buds, they're super green and plump. But there are others that are browning, becoming crispy. So what do? We cut those off, we prune the plant. They're wasting energy and nutrients, so cut them off and allocate those resources to the leaves that are growing well. Our brains do the same thing. They prune information that isn't considered important. It increases the efficiency of the entire neural network, the entire memory processing system. There's no need to remember the rise and the fall of Caligula during Roman history when you're an adult working in finance. It will probably be useful if you're teaching a Roman history course though. So we need to let our brains know that this information is important, that we should remember it. But how? Remember the bike example. We can apply tools used to learn muscle memory to these declarative memories. How did you learn to ride a bike? You took it step by step. Started off simple. 1, get on the bike. 2, push off with your legs. Bam, you fell to the ground. Okay, let's do it again. Get on the bike. Push off with your legs. Now tighten your core. You ride for 3 seconds and then bam, you fall off once again. Okay, let's readjust. Let's redo it. Get on the bike, push off with your legs, tighten your core and steady the handlebars. And now you ride for 15 seconds. With each iteration, you learn something, try to recall it, fail, realize what's missing and try it again. With each iteration, you tell the brain that this is important to remember. The more iterations you use, the more it gets ingrained into your muscle memory. Now, I haven't ridden a bike in years, but I can still pick it up each time and ride without any mental effort. So how do we apply this to learning vocabulary? And here are a few principles that I personally go by. 1, you won't remember it the first time. This transition from working memory to long-term memory is a process that requires time. You need to learn a word, forget the word, learn it again, build up those recall muscle memories. So don't get frustrated if you keep forgetting a word. Maybe it's just too early to learn that. The concept may be too abstract or challenging because your language framework that you currently have is too small. So drop it and come back to it later. And this is actually a neural pathway that spaced repetition, or SRS, softwares capitalize on. I personally use Anki for this, if you see my videos, but they hijack this memory recall system, or Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve, which just essentially says that the most efficient memory recall is done right before you forget a word. So, number 2, learn things that are important to you. Why were you able to keep getting back on that bike when you fell time and time again? Because it was important to you. The same is true for learning vocabulary. Learn words that are important to you. And one huge aspect of memory is actually the combination of various regions of the brain that work in tandem to consistently reinforce each other. Now, I have very intense memories of my disdain of avocado. I guess I'm not a true millennial because I hate avocado toast with a burning passion. But I guess I'll be able to afford a house in the future because I'm not wasting all my money on avocado toast. Any Graham Stephan watchers here? But why can I vividly remember this seemingly unimportant occurrence in my life? It was a combination of senses. various emotional, visual, sensory, and tactile senses that combined and reinforce each other to keep this memory prominent. The oily texture of unseasoned avocados, and friends, please put salt or pepper or any preferred seasoning on your avocados, combined with the sight and the smell of a plate full of avocado, which reinforce my feelings of greasiness and grossness. So every time that I see an avocado, I recall all of these memories, all of these senses that have worked together to remind me that avocados are gross. Trying to work on that. I can eat sushi now with avocado on it and guacamole, so that's improvement. But we can do the same for learning vocabulary or any other type of information. How do we learn vocabulary? Well, here's 3 tips that have worked out for me. 1. Learn things that are important to you. Start off learning from things that you have an interest with. If you're checked out during learning, there's no way you'll have the mental and the physical fortitude to keep learning and recalling enough to combine a working memory, convert a working memory into long-term memory. And now as a beginner, that doesn't mean you have to dive headfirst into native content. That's really hard. But if you enjoy textbooks, find a textbook that you find relatively interesting. Maybe the text itself isn't interesting yet, but the feelings of being able to read in your target language could fill that importance role. That's a combination of feelings right there, which will help you to reinforce vocabulary. Have you ever been able to sing a song from your childhood by heart, even though it's been 10 years since you've heard it? Why do you think that is? You love that song so much that you kept listening to it and singing it. So let's incorporate that same level of interest in the content that we learn from. 2, use different sensory experiences. Like my avocado story, there's a lot of different things that are happening to reinforce that memory. So read a word, then write the word, then listen to the word, then recite the word. The more context that you encounter that word in, the easier it'll be to remember the place you learned it, the feelings you learned it from, and the details about it, like all the different avocados. Now 3, learn words in context of a larger narrative. Remember how I said last week that the brain is a pattern recognition machine? How can one pattern recognize if we learn words in isolation? It's easier to remember story plots than random word definition. Learn words in context of a larger narrative. Remember how I said last week that the brain is a pattern recognition machine? How can one pattern recognize if we learn words in isolation? It's easier to remember story plots rather than random word definitions. There is a reason why I couldn't retain the vocab list from my exams, but I can remember the plot of Harry Potter. Stories are compelling. Stories teach us things. Stories move us emotionally. Stories make us think. What does this sound like? The brain's combinatory reinforcement through various sensory experiences. When you learn a word within a story, you'll remember the characters, the plot, moments when you laughed or moments when you were frustrated. Those all help to recall new words. And tune in next week where I'll explain the incredible utility of reading in your target language to learn new words, where you can apply these 3 tips to help recall and to memorize them. There's going to be 2 types of reading comprehension, extensive and intensive reading. So we will explore that next week. But I hope you have a great rest of your days. If you like this video, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Help boost up my numbers in the algorithm. I'm very, very close to 3K. Maybe I'll get there at this point. We'll see. But thank you all for watching. Check out Mandarin Companion. Not Mandarin Companion, Standard Mandarin Weekly. Also check out Mandarin Companion too, it's great. But check out Standard Mandarin Weekly if you're interested in really cool reading comprehension on current events and topics that are relevant to you to get that interest component in. And I have a 5% discount code in my description box. So check that out. Check out my Patreon if you're interested, and I will see you guys next week. 再见. Cut!